I'm not going to talk about the tires. Thanks. This presentation is based upon a book that literally just came out. Being a retired person, you have the advantage of like sitting up in the mountains of Colorado doing research, going to a few conferences, supporting things internationally. But I'll caveat, especially new things like Internet of Things, we're still figuring it out, right? And so some of what was talked about this morning, that's potential for you all growing careers in area and things like that. And some of these other things like the little tractor, we'll talk about why that's actually in the presentation here. So Internet of Things, y'all heard of it? Those merging things early. And as I travel around the world, it seems like everything is getting networked and everything's getting on computers. Anybody have dogs? Pets? Do you have your animal chip? No. You're here? Yeah. So your animals are Internet of Things, right? You can scan it and it'll say, you know, I'm owned by so-and-so. Our dogs are chipped. I was at a conference in Sweden. They were offering chips to people. Put in your hand and use to scan anything. So, but whoops, is that you doing that?
That is me doing that. I'm trying to get the sound.
Oh, okay. So, but the question I have, and I came out of the embedded world. That was my first book, was on testing embedded software, really embedded software systems. And it occurs to me as I moved into Internet of Things is that you can test the device itself, little small things in some cases, and maybe large things. But really, as a system, we're looking at other things. Where do we start testing? Where do we stop testing? Part of what this presentation is about and book. And hopefully we get, is that what's going on in the broadcast?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't like to see things left untested. That's just the nature of where I came out of. So I want to talk about some of the things that I believe are going to have to happen in the Internet of Things. Beyond just testing the device, we're going to have edge connections that are part of the testing problem that, as I see it, and then kind of a system of systems for some of these things. All of which have to work for the ultimate users, which may not just be the person holding the Internet device, but somebody at Google or country or city somewhere. It has to work for them too. And the world I came out of, we did big systems, really big systems. I'm one of those ex-rocket scientists, people that you hear about. I was actually a rocket scientist, worked on the space shuttle and things like that. We worried not just about the controller, and there were many of them on the space shuttle. We worried about the whole system and flying around the world, talking to ground stations. We worried about that too. So this is nothing new to some of us, but we did verification and validation testing, starting at the very beginning, going through the end of the life cycle of the device. I want to talk about that. And I want to point out what I think some, maybe not all, of the skills that are going to be needed out there in the presentation. So I mentioned, you know, what is this thing? So what are these things? You have broad classifications here. You have the consumer Internet of Things, home, personal, children, education, travel, robotics for the house. Anybody got a Roomba or something like that that runs around your house? Did it work for you? Yeah. Really? You already mentioned my house is weird. It didn't work in my house. The house is very strange. You can never figure out. It's one big open space, basically. The space was too big for the robot to figure out. I had a very early version of it. You also have Internet of Things at the industrial scale. IoT, factories, transportation, construction. That's some of the early people that are adopting these things. Railroads, they're all controlled. You don't even need people to drive the trains. They have to have a legal permit. but really somebody sitting in the control room can control the train that's 3 miles long. Anybody scared by that? I'm a little nervous about that. I was paid to be nervous. So you have the industrial, and then you kind of have the middleware, which is things, Kathleen Romas. Is that her putting that up there?
Yeah, unfortunately.
She's a friend, I hope.
Okay.
Medical, the middle size, the medical devices, like can you track your medical stuff? Personal safety, security, robots show up again. And then you have this thing. Anybody know what that is? The tractor down there at the bottom? It's a snowcat. It's a bulldozer made for snow. Why do I bring that up? You'll find out. But that thing actually has software in it, and it talks to other things. So it's the beginning of Internet of Things. So verification, validation, what do those terms mean? So verification, as simple as I can make it, is assessing a system to ensure that it meets its requirements and specifications. Written down. The things most testers are familiar with requirements showing that it works. The bigger, harder problem is the validation side, which really tries to answer the question, does the overall system meet what the users of that system really want, beyond the requirements, beyond the design of it? It's a much harder question to answer, because if we forgot something as a requirement, a lot of testers never test that. Validation people would go, gee, should the rocket be able to do this? And when the answer is yes, we fix it, add new requirements, cycle would continue. So testing the device in that standalone mode, for me, is not enough. A lot of companies will darkly just test the device in the mode and say it's somebody else's problem to go there. And I think as an industry, particularly some of our customers, they're going to want the bigger pictures. So there's big opportunities in my mind for a lot of testers to look at the edge level and maybe the system level in this verification validation of things. That nature of independent verification validation, the industries I came out of, working with governments and big things, that's pretty common. We learned early on we couldn't just test the little chip on the side of the rocket in isolation and not worry about fitting into the whole picture, including like the ground systems. So as an industry, we've got history. Now, the people out of the IT side of life and the PC side of life and the web side of life, are they familiar with that? Some cases, yes, but I think a lot of cases they aren't. And so as we move into this technological capitalism of everything in the world connected, that you've been scared by everything being connected, good. You're hired. We should all be a little bit nervous by that, but it's also a benefit potential. We got people connected around the world. I was in Tibet some years ago, and people are using little devices and talking to each other in the world. And there are these remote villages that don't have power, don't have roads going to them, they get food by donkeys, and yet they're connected. And so we have to start thinking about this whole system. So the test environments that I think we have to start thinking about in the future and setting up for these Internet of Things, it's the hardware. Can't forget about the hardware. It's the software, it's testing, it's the operations. We have DevOps, right? But I like the ones that go DevOps, test, security, in ops. Because all those things are part of the problem space for me. And so we have needs, we've got the D&D and the results of the test activities going out. So I kind of mentioned this earlier, but here's a graphic of it. On the left side there, we have your house maybe with some Internet of Things devices floating around in it. I've got a bunch of them in my house. They talk out to the edge. The cell phones, the PCs. Those kinds of things that are still in the house, but maybe part of the global nature of the house itself. But from there, it talks out to the cloud. and puts the data out in the cloud. Now, who's interested in the cloud? Well, it's people like companies, it's people like governments, maybe you a little bit as the home person. But the money, if you will, is spread out over this. And anybody get annoyed when you like type something into Google, and then you start getting bunches of ads and things like that. That's the cloud. You know, and my wife's a really anti-cloud person. So she makes me do all the cloud stuff. Why? Because I figure I'm well known, I talk a lot, and my identity is just out there. So, I exist out in the cloud and the edge. She's not so much in the cloud. She's at home, nice and safe in the weird house in the mountains of Colorado. So I kind of think, we have to, when we think about testing Internet of Things now and certainly in the future, as we get more of them, and they're going to be everywhere, I personally believe. We mentioned the dogs. They're going to track everything, whoever they are. So we have to think the big picture on that stuff, I do believe. So some examples of this. I mentioned the weird house that I live in the mountains of Colorado. It's literally the wilderness. We have solar panels. The house is almost net zero, meaning it generates as much energy as it uses. One of the cool things and some of the main people that want to see that kind of stuff. But these panels are Internet of Things devices. They talk to a router in our house and record things. And we talk out to some central item. And we've had them for a number of years now. We have had problems. And actually talked to the company that manufactures this some years back. They said, yeah, you're using a non-standard configuration. We only test this configuration. And I'm like, but I'm in a weird place. I'm in the middle of the wilderness. I don't have, I do everything through cellular. I don't have a ground-based router system talking to cable. Well, you're just weird. Tell me something I don't know. So, we started, learning how to fix these things ourselves because we're kind of testing it, and we're really not testers, but we're both techie people. So my wife goes around and fixes stuff and reloads things. Should we have to do that? Probably not, because not everybody is as technically savvy as Laura and my wife and myself are. So when we're talking about even something as simple as some solar panels talking out the power company, we shouldn't expect users to solve the problems. And I can tell you from talking to some of the vendors in the power company, right at the moment, they're clueless. They go, we don't know, it's too new. It's like, you fix it yourself, which Laura and I can do, but probably not everybody. I mentioned the snowcat, a piece of heavy equipment. So I live on a road 1.5 miles in from the nearest maintained by the government. It's 1.5 miles of snow. I have to plow about 5 months out of the year. I get snow drifts, depending on what part of the world you're in, about 5 meters high. For those of you in the U.S., about 50
meeting?
50 feet high. Snowcat can handle it. The Snowcat has software, has smarts. When I first got the thing, brand new, I had an older one, just replaced it, and plowing along, I did something wrong and the thing stopped. I couldn't get it to move, engine's running, would not move. And what do I do? Any clues what I did? Oh, by the way, it's through my phone. Any clues what I did? What do you do when your computer stops? Restart, boom. You guys would have figured it out. Because I was sitting in this thing, I was like, wait, I'm smart. Because I could see the little computer panel flashing, I could see my phone. I could tell it was unhappy, couldn't tell why. Yeah, I rebooted the thing, it started right up and it kept going. So there's an example where they're not quite there with the integrating of all these things. And so examples of where we as the Internet of Things technology, we're failing. And like I said, my wife and myself to figure out how to solve these problems. I'm willing to bet about 99% of the rest of the population won't. they'll be angry, and they'll dump the products, right? Which ultimately, if you're selling the products, that's not a good thing to have people dumping products. So verification and validation. I'm not going to go through every one of the kinds of verification tests and validation tests. There's whole books on that. Some of the things in my book are covered, at least the important ones. I haven't mentioned, don't kill me for this, but I support ISO. ISO is International Standards Organization. IEEE executive for them. By the way, volunteer, I don't get paid anything for that. But what we do is we write standards, and I'll mention a couple of those as we go through this. But the verification areas are things like analysis, static analysis reviews, formal verification, model checking, and checking the requirements. We as testers all know about testing the requirements, I hope. Both are test analysis demonstration, regression testing, error guessing. Anybody doing exploratory testing? I love exploratory testing. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And people go, manual testing is going to die and be replaced by AI. I haven't seen an AI system be smarter than, sorry, Robin's probably, yeah, Robin's probably smarter than most AI. Not me. I'm old, but love exploratory testing, attacks, tours, patterns, model-based testing. Model-based testing, again, higher level, but some good stuff there. And of course, there is a place for automation. I love automation. Systems I worked on, we had to automate everything. We were embedded rockets. Our input frequency was 10 milliseconds. Anybody think they can input data every 10 milliseconds? No. So we had to automate that stuff. So that's the both sides. And then the validation, use cases, alpha, beta testing, prototyping, simulation and emulation, hardware, software tests. Places I worked, we had big, expensive labs. And when I say expensive, multi-million-dollar, occupied whole buildings, and things like that. It's a lot of fun to work with these things. But we were testing at system level, the hardware and software, because it's really bad if you blow a rocket up. We had a saying, we never wanted to be on the nightly news. We blow a rocket up and we're on the nightly news. A lot of times we'd launch in the news. It's the bad news that we like to highlight. So we did all this kind of stuff and more. I think the Internet of Things stuff is going to have to go that way. So skills for you all to consider based on this morning's talk. This is not an exhaustive list. These are the things that I kind of think that some of us software testers may want to move into, that certainly I moved into. Hardware engineering and testing. I worked with hardware testers. So they were in the embedded lab that we were in. I wasn't smart enough to know what they all did, but as a manager, I could manage them and get them doing the things that they needed to do. What they needed to do was have the software parts there and running. So I was software engineer, system engineer, and then tester. We had the software people, the software test people. And as I said, I moved into systems engineering, which has a test component years and years ago. Internet of Things, we're going to have testers that think at all of those levels. If you're just a pure software tester, yeah, that'll be a good career. There'd be limited. That's what I believe. As this morning's talk kind of mentioned, you got to get outside of your comfort level on things. I certainly got out of my comfort level a lot, but you learn more from your failures than your successes. If you don't learn from your failures, what happens? Well, yeah, but you're doomed to repeat them. And yeah, I didn't really ever get fired, but I did repeat some things. And, they said, you did that last time. And I was like, yeah, I'm slow learner. I also believe artificial intelligence will have a place in Internet of Things and data analytics. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of times management thinks testing is done, development's done, get rid of all the developers and testers and give it to the ops. I don't believe that model will work for anything. The life cycle continues on. Your staff may reduce, but the testing is going to continue. Where should we learn as testers from? Well, Internet of Things is going to generate such massive amounts of data, but what does the data get used for? It's used by the marketing people. It's used by government, and who knows. I advocate that the testers, probably well too, the testers need to be looking at that data. But anybody work on a system that generates 8 terabytes worth of data during one testing cycle? Yeah, it's probably not many. I did some work with one area company I used to be in. They would generate 1 to 4 terabytes for an individual test. Massive test. You cannot, as a human, process that data. Statistics, data analysis, and a little bit of AI can. So testers in this world are going to have to go to those kinds of things. Now, do you have to be an AI expert or a statistical expert? No. Again, what I did a lot of times, I had one project, I realized I was going to get a lot of data. I hired somebody that was a statistician. Set this up. Why? Because I know enough statistics to know when I'm out on my own. There's full college degrees. So that's the kind of thing you've got to be looking at. Documentation and communication. Places I worked, we did a lot of documentation. Anybody like doing documentation? Oh, come on, some of you wanted. Yeah. Documentation is one of those things that you love to hate and hate to love, or something like that. I, besides speaking a lot and writing, I have a problem with dyslexic. So it's really a chore for me to document things. But I learned early on to document things and then get somebody else to review them. It makes sense, it communicates things out to management. I had to train management of some of the statistics stuff because I organized a lot of the statistics stuff as a statistician. But then I took it to the vice president and they're like, we don't understand this. And it took me 3-4 months to get them to understand the data that they're seeing. And then they started expecting it every single month because they understood it and they communicated. That was part of this. Knowledge of standards and things out there. I have a love-hate relationship with standards. As I said, I now work on them. So I guess I kind of love them. But part of why I'm there is because I also hate them. And if you have only people who are there because they think it's great and love it, and don't have somebody there that's without in comments, I think that's the problem. So I work on these things partially because I'm constantly saying, yeah, but on that. So some of those to look at, IEEE 1012, that's the verification and validation standard. I've been on that working group for forever. There's the ISO standards. The one I directly support is called 9219. Again, I love it, I hate it. So it has to be tailored. Anybody working with FDA, Food and Drug, they've got all kinds of standards for devices. Why? People. Lawyers get upset when they kill people. But Internet of Things is going to have that risk. And there's other. So question. How many of you have an engineering library, either at office or at home? Okay. How many books? Any idea? Oh, at least 30. At least 30. So my wife and I, she was ex-QA, that's software configuration management. And probably in just the technical side, I don't remember, but I haven't measured. My bookshelves are about 6 feet tall. About 4 feet wide, and about 3 of them with books and papers and pack rat. The reason I mention that is I've had managers go, why are you so smart? Well, I learned early on a trick is I'd say, I can answer that question when we get back to you. I'm busy. And I'd go look it up in books and write it up and send it off. Thought I was really smart. No, I have a lot of books. I can look things up, but the other one, of course, is the internet. But you all know everything on the internet is true. So if it's on the internet, it has to be true. So have books on these things for skills. Security. Anybody like security? But we need more people to like and care about security. I started in the embedded world screaming about security at meetings and conferences like 7 years ago. People in the embedded world laughed at me, said, not a problem. Anybody know what SCADA is? It's controlling your life. Things like power systems and factory control systems. It's now Internet of Things. There was a bug, we won't go into the details of it. It's the first known case of weaponized attacks. And a lot more from talking about details, but security is now real. Attacks are now real, and you see it. If you're paying attention to Ukraine and things like that. It's all happening, and this is the famous infinity sign of stuff. And security testing, you have to start early, you have to plan, you have to do it, and you've got to continue it forever. Why? Because we can't test everything. You can't security test everything. Internet of Things, you're connected out to the whole world. Your Internet of Things device and edge of the cloud, they're going to be attacked. It's just they're going to be attacked. And the bad guys, the black hats, particularly like Internet of Things. Anybody know why? Because the weaknesses, but also there's so many. And they've been used in something now several times in someone's back final status attack or flood a website. You can bring it down because there's too many requests. Internet of Things is set up right. Really good at doing that because there's literally thousands or so many millions. So security is big. I go through these really quick here. Social engineering. Anybody like that term? When I first ran into that, I said, what the heck are you talking about? I mean, it sounds friendly, right? It's not, you know. But the white hat, the testers like us that should be doing this, that's where you start. Try and figure out socially, you know, where the threats and vulnerabilities are. Pen testing, everybody heard of pen testing? You know, and anybody doing pen testing? I like you. What we're trying to do in pen test is get into the system and access sensitive information. Control and password cracking, you use PK crack? You know, anything like it?
Not really. It's kind of like different group.
Yeah, but so PK crack is, and I don't do this because I'm a technical person, but I had a few students that used it to like just show that it fit into neighbors' systems and things like that. It's a list of all common passwords, and you can just run through it and it bounces off, and when you get a hit, you're in. And once you're in, you want to elevate your privileges. You want to go from just an entry level data looker to somebody that can like delete things and control things. That's bad. I mentioned the denial of service attacks. Security taint analysis, I'm not going to go into. It's in my book, Internet of IoT system testing. And it's an interesting attack. Now, does the book address all attacks? No, because they keep changing. There's a lot of them. Tampering, trying to tamper and mess with things and break things. I mentioned the data system that's what they were doing. It's tampering. Anybody know what OWASP is? If you're looking at learning security and security testing, that's like the site to start with. I've got a chapter in the book on OWASP. There's something called OWASP ZAP. I think it's kind of an advanced version of PK crack. It bangs, and it's just, I believe it's free and open source. OWASP is pretty much organized that way. Again, just tools. Malware and security of off-the-shelf software. SolarWinds. Anybody heard of SolarWinds? If you don't know about it, go out and read on it. But the bad guys now, open source, we put it everywhere, right? But do you really know what's in your open source software? No. Now, my wife was software configuration management person. She had to know what was going into her systems and had several fights with developers. Well, it solves this problem. She goes, yeah, what's all this other code? Really? And that's how bad things get in there for that. And then there's spoofing attacks where we're trying. Anybody get phishing emails? Yeah, all the time. Anybody get phishing phone calls? Oh yeah, yeah. So when I've got free time and I'm feeling kind of pensive move, I've been known to answer those and play along with the person. And then when I'm tired, I go, "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" They go, "Well, not really." I go, "I'm with the sheriff's department." But that's spoofing. And then finally, software test attacks from James Whitaker Thompson in my first book. Those are things that, if you don't know these guys, particularly anybody who knows James Whitaker, he's a really great person, much better than I am. I first ran into him some years ago at the STAR conference. He was talking about something, he was dancing around and singing Neil Young song on stage, and I was like, I gotta meet these guys. They've got books now on breaking your software, and I'm a big fan of breaking software. So the security skills, again, software skills, systems engineering skills, understanding how these systems are used from a security standpoint, testing in governments. If your Internet of Things device or the edge or the cloud, if there's a chance you're going to be regulated somewhere, and you've got the federal government, but you've got local governments now too. You're going to have to pay attention to that stuff. Anybody like talking to lawyers? No. But I've been involved in one situation where something was really wrong with a rocket. My wife was at a dinner with all the women of the company, and she ended up sitting next to one of the lady lawyers for the company. And the lady lawyer said to my wife, "Oh, I know your husband." I had no idea. Let alone that she was looking at my documentation. I said, trying to figure out if I was guilty of something. So governance and standards, the quality characteristics, yep. Another standard that I support that's under revision right at the moment is the one on dependability. These systems are going to have to be dependable. That's IEEE 982.1, and we're trying to figure out now how to update it. It's an interesting exercise. But things like performance, interoperability, integration, reliability, security, attacks, and maintainability are going to be in there by reference to others. Do you need to know all these things? No, but again, if you're aware of it, you can go look up things in books, which, again, you heard my story about how to convince management that I'm much smarter than I really am. So the next part is this AI and data-driven stuff. You have the development people and the test people, and we get our jobs done, but you'll notice the arrows are double-headed. You're going to come back, these systems are going to get maintained and updated probably forever. Maybe a smaller staff doing these things. And I mentioned the data analytics and the AI. If you're not getting that data, if you're not looking at what your users are doing with it, and where it's going, and doing statistical kinds of things, I think you're going to miss the picture of the device. Even more importantly, you may find areas that you need to test better or test sooner, because this is kind of what the bad guys are doing, and when they find a vulnerability, they go after it. If we can detect they found the vulnerability and close the door before they get into it, it's great, or better. So there's a data flow going on here between the home side, the user side of things, the edge side of things, and the cloud. And there may be data elements out of all that that we can capture and use. But again, you're going to be looking at probably terabytes of data at some point. I mean, it's tools, things like that to do these things. So I know a lot of manual testers are afraid of things like math. I was a very bad math student for a long time, but I'm also I ended up getting a degree in math. That was a long time ago. Most of my math has faded away, but now I know enough about statistics to pick up the phone and call somebody who knows about that stuff, or have them help me with that. So in that area, I like to think of it as dev, test, SecOps. It's going to be that whole continuum. It goes on forever. Looking at the data analytics and the AI. Massive amounts of data, I mentioned that. It starts at the homes and goes forward. One of my stories, I did some consulting with Bill Liu in a company that did speakers, smart speakers, like stereo and things like that. They were having problems with their software and their software testing. And then they had all this data up on the side. And it's like, they came to help us. I'm like, why aren't you guys using it? The help desk people knew what was going on. The testers and the developers kind of did it. So we have to get all that integrated and supporting. The skills for that, again, systems engineering, you've heard that before. Software test architectures. And we're struggling right in one of my working groups as to what is software test. Nobody's entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure such a thing exists. We know software architectures exist. And what I've seen is a lot of times the test architectures reflect the thing with the testing. Makes sense, right? Other people go, we don't know what that is. So I think that we're going to work on that area. Knowledge and familiarity with test frameworks, tools, all the unit testing, AI, automation, continuous testing. Do you all have to be an expert in one of these areas? No. If you have one or two and then go hire people, I hired a lot of people to do things I did in a group or a mission. And I would go to them and go, how do we do this hardware? Which I go, will it work? And I go, oh, yeah. Cool. But I couldn't do that myself. Statistics and the math, and then understanding the AI, or at least to use it at a certain level. And I fooled with AI and neural networks and things like that, enough to know that if I have a real problem, I'm going to call Tariq or Jason Harborn and go, help. So, summary on that. We're still learning about Internet of Things. It's already around, it's already getting deployed. Denver, there was an activity in Denver where they were starting to put Internet of Things on traffic lights and traffic flow. Anybody guess what this was? They were free. Yeah, they're monitoring us. What they were trying to do is make the traffic flow better, which everybody wants. Around here, Denver, like most big cities, traffic flow sucks. Yeah, and they were trying to make the traffic flow. But the public reaction was, just the opposite, because they could see the cameras and stuff up there. So those things are going to unfold. The paper that's out there talks about all this stuff and kind of points at the book. I think as testers, we have to move out of just being software testers. Comfort zone stuff that we talked about in the first presentation. You got to get out of your comfort zone. Now, does every tester have to do that? No. Some testers can stay what they're doing. In my mind, that's great. I would find that cool. And I worry a lot about security and security assessment. Largely because I've been advocating 20 years now. And we first did it with the embedded systems out of town. They don't do that. That's some bad things happen. And years ago with Jason Arborn and Tariq King, we had some interesting conversations here at this conference out over on Starbucks. And I learned a lot from those guys. Learning a lot because I think it's going to be the way the future is, at least for some of us. So my house again, my book that just came out 2 weeks ago. I just got the hard copies of the book right before I came to this meeting, so I didn't bring them with me, but I do have a soft copy on the computer if anybody wants to look at it. I don't like doing a lot of promotion. By the way, you don't make any money writing and selling technical books. The first one I did, I think I'm up 25 cents an hour. But I do it not for the money, I do it for the love of the industry to help you all. I mentioned my snow cap, which keeps me alive. And that's kind of a funky picture of me. 2 weeks ago in Greece, my wife said she liked that picture. So that's the presentation. Questions?
John, we do have something online.
Okay. So I kept seeing things pop up. I chose to ignore all that.
So for AI ML system testing, how do you come up with testing data sets, not data sets for the model only?
So I think they're asking for the data sets to test the machine algorithms and things. So I can answer what we're currently kind of looking at and doing. There's actually a working group as part of ISO that's looking at AI system testing. It's very early in its infancy, and they're still trying to figure out some of the answers to that. We don't have accepted industry practices for that. I support another group that's worrying about, anybody know what AI bias or bias in data is? So bias is something that we saw early on in some of the facial recognition programs that were out there. The facial recognition AI systems were trained, guess what? White male people that are common to Silicon Valley. They would not do this well with new people because we're different. That's a bias problem. That's not good. Why? Because everybody's a human. So the training data, what's limited we know about is you've got to consider that bias problem. You've got to consider that the training set for the system is representative. Not easy to know when it's representative because we know we can bias systems that are artificial intelligence to think they're working when they're not. There's a famous case years ago. They wanted to train an AI system to spot tanks out in the field. It's the Army, obviously. And they gave it a training set and then looked at what the AI system learned. But it actually learned is not to recognize tanks, but to recognize cloudy days versus sunny days. Because the training set, all the tanks were on cloudy days. So there isn't a good answer to that question at the moment. There are literally smart people, smarter than me, even though I support the groups, looking to answer these things. Come back in maybe 5, 10 years. But be aware of the bias problem.
How do you measure or know your validation is good enough?
Probably 2 ways. One is prior to system usage, a lot of that data analytics stuff that I was talking about that I did for these systems, after I got the managers trained what the data was telling me and they understood what the data was telling them, we looked at the composite of data test results from hardware, software, system testing, and number of tests and that kind of stuff to release into the field. And then I think you have to, that problem of continuous analysis and data, you come back as the system gets fielded and say, is it what we expect? Because the world being what it is, we're not smart enough to see the future exactly. So data coming back out, you have to look at it coming back, I think. Any other questions here in the room?
Yeah, it's just gonna. So we got a couple more here. What automation tools or platforms can be used for automated testing of IoT?
In my book, and personally, I do not recommend individual tools, just because as soon as I do that, one vendor goes, "Well, I'm better. Why aren't you recommending me?" And you know, so I won't name specific tools and vendors. The other factor that goes in there is they change constantly. They leapfrog each other and things like that. If you want, I can give you names and contact me. But the current ones I might recommend are, but in a public setting or in my book, I don't recommend specific vendors because it's just fraught. I will say the kinds of things I do like are tools that work with model-based testing, MBT, some of the AI tools out there and the data analytic tools. And there's a lot of vendors for statistical analysis tools. One big one that I almost would mention, it's right afterwards, I'll mention it because it's on all the colleges. And, you know, then on some of the other things, I think the AI systems are unique enough. It's hard to have a generic tool that's good for every kind of AI device. So again, in the embedded world I came out of, and I think it applies for IoT, is in the labs we kind of had to customize things, mix and match and glue things together. And I had a team doing that for me, and they were very good at it. So is that enough of a tap dance?
I think so. Do you include monitoring in B&B?
Monitoring, I'm assuming of the testing and the test results. I'm assuming that's what they're talking about. And yes, absolutely. Doing B&B and testing, we monitored, we moved into Agile early on. We had daily stand-ups. My team hated the stand-up. They were like, "Can't we sit down?" And I was like, "No, as soon as you sit down, the meeting goes on." So I made them stand up. We also had, a lot of times they'll say, do the meeting at the beginning of the day. When we were running at several points close to 24/7. So the only time everybody was together was about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And the different shifts would come in. So we monitored constantly on that kind of thing. We monitored the daily tests. And we were, again, Agile. So, and I didn't think of this, my other smart testers. We had a lab, I mentioned. They had a whiteboard. It's in the lab, and they put the tests up, scheduled for that week that I scheduled. And then each day, they have a smiley face and a frowning face, and you get what those will work. Yeah, it took management only a little bit of time to figure out they could come in and, you know, good test. Okay, what's wrong with this test? There's no face. But that was, you know, a real-time, simple monitoring thing. And then I did monthly reports with all the graphs and statistics that the management liked. So yeah, I believe you got to do that constantly in the team, particularly.
And one final one from online. Can you talk a little bit more about OWASP, what it is, what it stands for?
Look in the book. I'm sure it spells out OWASP. I think I cannot remember what OWASP specifically stands for. If you do a search on it, I just call it OWASP. No, it's like a lot of those things, which is very bad of me. But it's a website and an organization. It's kind of like this one. I think it's nonprofit. They've got information's kind of security standards. They've got the security OWASP ZAP, which I have not personally used, and yes, I know. And it stands for Open Web Application Security Project. Thank you. Yeah. So, and people go, well, that's web stuff. Well, but a lot of this IoT stuff is going to have the same problem. It's hooked into the web. So it's kind of beyond there. And thank you very much, Robin.
And it covers pen testing really well.
Yep, and they, what I did in my book, and it's open source, so I kind of listed what the good parts that I thought were in the OWASP. But that's for me, and from the book's perspective, there's massive amounts of information. It's really good, and to the white hat guys, you know the difference between a white hat versus a black. Yeah, it's sort of like light and dark. You know, the good guys do good stuff. The bad guys, some of them are doing it just for thrill. We were doing it for money, but you can be a white hat and do it for money too. So and become famous.